So today we're going to go into Gobekli Tepe.
So I'm mildly familiar. Give me a little bit of a brief synopsis for me in the chat.
Okay. Gobekli Tepe is a pretty recent discovery. They found it. They originally found it back in the 60s. Some surveyor was out there and he stumbled on it, but they didn't think it was very significant, so they hadn't really touched it until like 94, when a University of Chicago professor sent an archaeological team out there to start digging it up. And it turns out this place is way older than anything we know about currently. It's like 10,000 years old. So it pushes the architecture and some of the things they're finding in there pushes a lot of human evolution back way further than we thought it would. There's things that about this place that they shouldn't be there for the time period. There's carvings, there's intricate architecture. It's pretty neat. And they found out that it was intentionally buried by people.
That's interesting.
Yes. So it probably took more time to bury it than it did to build it. So the question then becomes, why did they bury it? Was this to preserve something? And if so, what? Was it? Because, if it was taken over by enemies, it would have been destroyed, not buried.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty unusual situation that we still don't really know much about. I guess let me introduce Graham Hancock first. Graham Hancock is I think they refer to him as a fringe archaeologist, I think is the term they use. He doesn't necessarily buy into the mainstream in a lot of things. He's of the opinion that humanity has amnesia and we've been civilized and sophisticated and possibly even more technologically advanced than we are now in the past. And he believes that there was some kind of catastrophic event, and probably multiple times, where the human race has had to kind of start over and rebuild. And he's a smart cookie. I like him a lot. Not sure if he's always right, but I like him a lot.
Yeah, I mean, anything that isn't mainstream is considered fringe, but I think you should always be challenging everything.
Agreed. He got into it big with Egyptologists. He was trying to tell these guys over there that, like, hey, this doesn't make any sense what you're saying. And they, try to write him off and refuse to talk to him. And he's been, for lack of a better term, persecuted his entire career for not holding the mainstream narrative viewpoint.
We'll have to do a show about that one then.
Oh yeah, he's awesome. He's pretty awesome.
All right, if you're ready, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's check this out. This is Graham Hancock on Mike Tyson's Hotboxing podcast, and it's a short little description by Graham.
The history of Göbekli Tepe is not only did they create it right at the end of this cataclysmic episode,
those cataclysmic episodes that I was talking about. This one, he believes, took place at about 11,500 years ago at the Younger Dryas, or the ending of the Ice Age.
Began 12,800 years ago with a cataclysm, with a sudden rise in sea levels. There was 1,200 years of absolute hell on Earth. Then there was another change of temperature. Global temperature shot up very rapidly. The last ice sheets collapsed into the sea.
And he's got two books, Fingerprints of the Gods, and there's another one that goes along with it. But he outlines a lot of this stuff in those books. They're good reads. I recommend reading.
It was him and somebody else, I believe, that were talking about a potential meteor strike during the Ice Age that melted a ton of ice, right?
You're talking about Randall Carlson.
Randall Carlson, yeah. Okay.
And Randall Carlson is I don't know if you would consider him a professional geologist, but he's been looking at studying, doing this stuff for like 50 years. And they've actually, the Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson actually took a tour across the United States and other places in the world, but they went all over the United States and they were documenting and logging all these really bizarre geological features that they believe was caused by a great flood. So what they think is a large asteroid impacted the Earth during the Ice Age, and all the glacial melt happened very, very quickly and violently and suddenly.
Which is kind of weird because it lines up with a lot of, I don't want to say biblical because it's not just biblical, it's worldwide religious text.
Yeah, and it's all over. It's not just Christianity. Everybody's got a story of a great flood in their history somewhere.
And that's the end of this episode. That's the beginning of our modern age, effectively. And at exactly that moment, Göbekli Tepe starts to be built by people who were only hunter-gatherers. They weren't a settled agricultural community, but they created this incredible structure.
Like I said, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been present, the ability to build this thing with a hunter-gatherer society.
Yeah, and I have questions about that. I don't know if you saw an article a couple of years ago, but there was a bone tool that dates back to, I think it was 40 or 50,000 years in, I believe it was North America up near Canada, which keeps pushing that timeline back.
There's a weird thing in North America where, I can't remember the name, but there's the something people, and the current theory is that nothing was before these people. So they don't dig. They hit that line in the dirt and then they stop because according to them, there's nothing that could be beneath it. So they don't bother. They've recently in the last few years found some tools like you're talking that pushes it back by a lot. And they actually found a new evidence of like a domesticated horse that was way further back, like 30 to 50,000 years past what we believe people were here for, which is really cool, really interesting.
Yeah.
The largest monumental structure on Earth. And in the process of creating it, they became agriculturalists. But the structure came first, the agriculture came second. And again, this is an unpopular view with archaeologists. But I think what we're looking at in Göbekli Tepe is what I call a transfer of technology. That people who are ready.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me at all. Like you'd be building megaliths and superstructures, but you wouldn't have agriculture. Like it's not how this stuff works.
Well, what he's, I think, hinting at or getting to is that somebody came to this region, built Göbekli Tepe as like a school of sorts, as a farming teaching place, so that they can transfer this knowledge onto these hunter-gatherers that are already there. And then agriculture started in that region at this time.
That's significantly more interesting.
It's pretty wild, man. This whole thing is really wild.
Already knew agriculture and who already knew how to create megalithic structures, came to Göbekli Tepe. They used the construction of Göbekli Tepe to mobilize the local population. And in the process, they taught them agriculture. And then they buried it like a time capsule, because that same Pillar 43 that we looked at earlier spells out two dates. It spells out the date of 12,800 years ago when the cataclysm began, and it spells out our date today at the different solstices, at the winter and summer solstices.
That's another unique thing about this. Well, maybe not unique, but another curious thing about this place. It's aligned perfectly with like cardinal directions, and it shows the winter and summer solstice through the architecture, which would be important if you're teaching people how to plant crops at the proper times.
Yeah, this is interesting.
It's pretty cool.
So the suggestion is, and I pursue this in episode 8 of Ancient Apocalypse, that what they were doing, why did they go to all that trouble to bury Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah.
Burying it was more work than making it.
Yeah.
They put a massive great hill on top of it. Why did they do that? And
Like I was telling you before the show started, this burying it, it would have taken so much longer to bury it than it did to build it.
Yeah, that's.
And if it was somebody that like conquered these people, that like took over, they wouldn't have buried it. They would have just destroyed it.
Yeah, the burying part's weird. Like, especially if they were using it to teach, you would think it would still be in use. The burying is what makes it extremely weird.
It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. Somebody intentionally buried it in a very careful manner so that it wasn't destroyed.
And the suggestion is it's a time capsule, and that they intended to pass down a message to the future. And they used astronomy to provide dates for that. And they said, a very bad thing happened in the time that we call 12,800 years ago, and a very bad thing is going to happen in your time. Unless you do something about it.
I think they were conscious of us.
Yeah.
They were conscious, and they thought, and they knew that we were going to read their work.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a message.
I think people had giant egos.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Tyson's right on that one.
Yeah, it's just so weird because it, like, all the mess, all the crazy stuff there was just offhand disregard. It's kind of like the more we dig, the more we're like, well, maybe
There's something weird going on here. There's something weird. And X-Comer, don't forget the handbags. I'm going to touch on it, but we're not going to get into it too deep on this one because that's going to be probably its own show.
handbags, like what your girlfriend or your wife brings home, or
Are you not familiar with the handbag thing?
I'm not.
Oh, you're going to love it. You're going to absolutely, I almost dropped an F-bomb. You're going to absolutely love it, bro.
All right, we'll definitely have to touch on that.
You're going to love it.
They thought they were gods, and God was going to see them, and they were going to see God when they died.
Many people think that, and who knows what we're going to see when we die. But what Göbekli Tepe speaks to me is a careful, deliberate effort to preserve a most extraordinary and inexplicable structure, to keep it safe. Bear in mind that it was, the work started 11,600 years ago. The site ran for about 1,000 years to 10,600 or 10,000.
1,000 years this place was being used.
That's a long time.
That's a super long time, bro. That's
Even the most like prestigious colleges on the planet right now are only like a couple hundred, and they've been rebuilt so many times.
well, and like obviously we're from the States, and over here like nothing's that old. Like we
No.
don't. That's
Well-
impossible for us to grasp that amount of time.
Yeah, there are some structures that old, but that's another topic for another day.
But as far as like, it's not like Europe where there's ancient buildings still standing everywhere. It's not like the Middle East where there's all these crazy old prehistoric sites. Like we don't have a whole lot of that here. And what we do have is usually a little different than what they've got.
I'm intrigued. I want to keep going. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
1,400 years ago. Then they close it down, they cover it up, they pour in millions of tons of rubble into all the stone circles, they create an artificial hill over the top of it, and they seal it. And then for the next 10,000 years, nobody knows it's there.
Yeah.
If it had been left open, it would have been destroyed by now. Human beings would have cannibalized it. They would have used it as a quarry.
Yeah.
They would have taken away all those big blocks and used them for other purposes. But because they buried it, it's still there today.